Okay, in this set of videos, I'm going to go over the topics from chapter 1 of the textbook. This is the chapter that covers the basics. So we're going to get into how to create a new workbook, as well as opening and saving workbooks, how do you enter data and edit it. We're going to create some simple formulas and use some basic functions. We'll look at formatting, which is a really important topic. That has to do with the appearance of your workbook. How do we modify columns, rows, worksheets, as well as getting around in a workbook, the screen appearance, and then finally some of those finishing touches. So we'll look at the page setup, which is useful when you're creating or you're adding headers and footers to your documents. How do you print your worksheets, as well as modifying the document properties. So for instance, if you wanted to put yourself, your name as the author of the workbook, so that if you shared it with someone else, they'd know that you were the one that created it. We'll go through how to do that. Okay. The very first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to show you how to put the Excel icon into your doc. Okay. You might already have it down here, but if you don't, let me show you how to do this, because we're going to be using Excel throughout the semester. So it just becomes easier to be able to click on the icon for Excel versus having to continuously search for it on your computer. Okay. So the way to do this is if you click on the launch pad, and you can come up here. If it's not immediately visible, if you type Excel, it'll bring up the icon, and just grab it. If you grab it with the touchpad and drag it down to the dock to wherever you want to put it, and then release, it gives you a shortcut down there. Okay. And then now that you've got it down here, you can just click on it, and this will open up Microsoft Excel. Okay. So we're going to first create a new workbook. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is double click on blank workbook. By the way, this is what's called the backstage view. So there's some stuff you can do in the backstage view. We're going to double click on blank workbook. Okay. And I've been using the word workbook. That's the name of an Excel file. So an Excel file is called a workbook. Now within each workbook, there are worksheets, and you can have multiple worksheets within a single workbook. Okay. My default is set up so that when I open a new workbook, one sheet is available. You may actually have it set up so that when you open a new workbook, 3 sheets are available, and that's perfectly fine. By the way, to add a new worksheet, you just click on that little plus symbol. If you've got worksheets you want to get rid of, you can right click on the worksheet and then delete. Okay. We're just going to use sheet 1, so I'm deleting these just so I have sheet 1. Okay. So we're going to work on sheet 1. Now let's just kind of orient ourselves to what's available here. You'll notice these buttons up here and these options up here. This is something called the menu ribbon. This is the home menu ribbon. The textbook also sometimes refers to this as the home tab. Okay. And as you click on these different tabs, it'll show you the different menu ribbons for each tab. Okay. Now I probably have a couple tabs that you don't have. Don't worry about that. The vast majority of what we're going to do is actually on the home menu ribbon. Okay. This has a lot of functionality that's useful. Let me also point out up here there are additional menus. So there's some menus that have functionality that are not immediately available in the menu ribbons. Okay. For example, notice there's a format menu. There's no format tab. Now I can format different things down here. The different options. But for instance, if I want to format a cell, I can come up here, format a row, etc., etc. Okay. So just kind of keep in mind that you do have some options up here that give you functionality that are not immediately available on the menu ribbon. Okay. The most important menu up here is actually the file menu. This is how you're going to open files, save files, print files. Okay, as well as change those document properties. Okay. That's really important. Okay. Now notice the way that the Microsoft Excel worksheet is set up. You've got a bunch of cells that are organized in columns. The columns are lettered. Okay. So Excel uses letters for the columns. Okay, and I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Command right arrow. That goes all the way to the end of the row. Okay, notice that there are, the columns go up to XFD. By the way, that's 16,384 columns. That's a lot of columns, okay? And Command left arrow is the keyboard shortcut to go back to the beginning of the row. Okay, so columns are lettered. Rows are numbered. If I hit Command down arrow, that's the keyboard shortcut to go all the way to the bottom. There are 1,048,576 rows that are available. And then again, Command up arrow is the keyboard shortcut to go back up to the top. Okay. By the way, if you're interested, there are a total of 17,179,869,184 cells that are available in an Excel workbook. Now, if you go back 15, 20 years, Excel workbooks could not hold even a fraction of that much data. But Microsoft has really done a lot of work to make Excel much more useful for big data. So it's made it much more versatile. Okay. We're not going to be working with any data that's that large, but it's just good to know that you can actually do a lot in an Excel worksheet. Now, as I mentioned, we have these cells. Okay. The cell address is made up of a combination of the letter of the column and the row number. Okay, notice up here, so I'm clicked in cell A1. This is what's called the name box. That shows you where you are in your file. And if I click like down here, I'm now in cell D8. Over here, I'm in F9. Okay, and by the way, I could actually click in here. Let's just type. So I clicked in the name box, and I'm going to type XD55. Hit enter, and that'll actually bring you down to XD55. Okay, so you can actually use the name box to navigate. Okay, and if I want to go back to A1, I can click back in the name box, type A1 and enter. It brings me back. Okay. By the way, there's a keyboard shortcut for getting back there, so let's go back to XD55. Okay, the keyboard shortcut for going home. Home is cell A1. Okay, cell A1 is referred to as home. The keyboard shortcut for that is Command function left arrow. Okay. I'm sorry, it's Control function left arrow. Control function left arrow. Control function left arrow brings you home. Okay. Or you could just type A1 in the name box. Okay. So that's very useful. There's also a formula bar. So the formula bar is where you would type whatever it is that you're going to put this on. So if we click on the formula bar for A1, I can type 10 and hit enter. And now I see the 10's there. And notice if I click on A1, it shows me what's in that cell in the formula bar, 10. Okay. And hit enter again. Let's go to A2, and I'm going to type the word hello. Hit enter. And now again, hello is there. Okay, what if I want to edit what's in the cell? Well, I could just click on the cell that I want to edit and then click up in the formula bar. I'm going to add an exclamation point and enter. There I go, I just edited that cell. So the formula bar is very useful for that, okay? That's how I can enter and edit data, okay? A couple other things to point out before we start creating a file here. Notice down here, I've got these 3 sort of icons. Right now, we are in what's called the normal view. You're going to spend 95% of your time in the normal view. This is typically where you're doing your work, in the normal view. But there's also a page layout view, which is very useful, particularly if you're adding headers and footers. Okay, this kind of gives you a preview of what this would look like if you print it on sheets of paper. There's also a page break preview. This isn't very useful right now. I don't have a lot of data here, but you could use the page break preview when you've got a bunch of data. It'll show you where the pages are going to break when you print this, and you can actually change where the page breaks are. Okay, I don't use that very often, but it's worth knowing that that exists. Okay, let's go back to normal. Okay, again, we're going to spend most of our time in normal, so let's go back to normal. And as I said, I want to type in some data that we're going to take a look at. But first, I want to get rid of this stuff. So one way I can do this is if I click on a cell and hit the delete button and enter, it deletes whatever's in that cell. Another way you could do this, and this is more useful if you have a bunch of data that you want to delete, from the home menu ribbon under editing. Okay, I'm clicking on that drop down, and then see this sort of eraser icon, clear. And this gives you some options. So you can clear all. You can also just clear the format. So let's say that I've got a bunch of data that's formatted, and I want to keep the data, but I don't want the formats. I can clear the formats and I leave the data there. And then there's also clear content. So again, what if I want to keep the formatting, but I want to get rid of the data? Then I can clear the contents. Okay, but in this case, I'm going to clear all. Okay, I'm clearing all. Okay, so we're going to enter data for store. Let's just call it Jonathan store. Okay. And by the way, in my view, this is very tiny. Just notice down here you've got a zoom bar. So you can click on the minus to make it smaller. You can click on the plus to make it larger. I'm going to make this 150%. Okay. By the way, you can also sort of drag this little bar. Okay. So let's go to 150%. Okay. 150%. Here we go. Okay. So make sure you're in A1 and type Jonathan's store. Okay. And then hit the tab key. By the way, let me just kind of show you. So to go up and down, to go down, you can hit the enter key or the return key. And then to go back up, you can hit shift return. That goes up. To go over to the right, it's the tab key. And then to go back to the left, it's shift tab. Okay. Now I could just click. But it's much simpler if you can just use your keyboard. Now you can also use the arrows, but I find that the return key and the tab key are the most useful keys to navigate around the worksheet. Okay, so we're going to create 3 columns for my store. We're going to create a column for items, and then hit tab. We're going to put in the forecast, hit tab, and then sales. Now hit return to go to the next row, and then tab to go to B2. Okay, I've got 5 items we're going to track here. So I've got item 01, tab. The forecast is 130,000. Notice I did put a comma in there, comma separated. That's very useful when you're working with large numbers. Okay, hit tab, and then sales for this item was 142,000. Okay, now hit return to go to the next row. Tab, item 02, hitting tab. The forecast for item 2 was 240,000, and the sales for item 2 was 235,000. Okay, and then hit return, go to the next row. So we're going to do 5 items. Now I could type item 3, item 4, and item 5 here. But there's a nice little thing that we can use in Excel. When you create a pattern, Excel can actually pick up the pattern and easily continue the pattern for you. So I'm going to go ahead and select these 2 cells. So I'm just with the touchpad dragging down to select those 2 cells. Notice at the bottom there's this little square. We call that, if you hover over it, it gives you that little black plus. We call this the fill handle. We do a lot with the fill handle. So if you hover over it and then click and drag down, notice it gives me a preview and it's picking up that pattern. I want to go down to row 6. I want item 05, release the trackpad or the touchpad, and there I go. It continued my pattern for me. Okay, so that's very useful. When you have a pattern going, you can grab the fill handle and keep that going. Okay, so here's what I'd like you to do. Let me go ahead and open up a file that has what I'd like you to open here. So bear with me as I navigate to this file. Okay, here we go. So what I'd like to do in a moment is complete your file here. So finish filling in the data here, and then come over to part B. And in part B, we'll start working with this data. We'll do some basic calculations as well as starting to look at some formatting.